Hi, everyone, and welcome to another InvestNow Meet the Manager. Today is a bit of a special one. I'm joined by Anthony Edmonds, who many of you will recognize as the founder of InvestNow and one of the real champions of making investing more accessible for everyday Kiwis. Since exiting InvestNow, Anthony's been busy building something new, Aurellan Asset Management. And Aurellan's global shares funds are now available on the InvestNow platform. So we thought it was a great chance to catch up and hear what he's been up to and walk through what makes Aurellan a little bit different. Anthony, great to see you again and welcome back.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Jason. So, g'day.
G'day. A lot of our customers will remember you, Anthony, as Mr. Invest Now, and rightly so, right? Given the key role you played in lowering the barriers to investing and bringing so many Kiwis who previously felt investing wasn't for them into financial markets. So, after selling Invest Now and our sister company, Funrock, you probably had the option of spending a lot of time mountain biking, fishing, and chasing snow somewhere, right? But yet, here you are again building another investment business. Can you talk us through what you've been up to since the exit and what ultimately led you to start Aurellan?
Yeah, Jason, it's probably fair to say I have done a fair bit of traveling, skiing,
I know.
mountain biking, and jet boating. But being a serial entrepreneur, I've really come back to my roots, and I've been super busy setting up a new funds management business, Aurellan Asset Management. And I guess it came about through a couple of discussions into the mid part of last year that I had. The first being with Campbell Gower, who owns Phil and Ted's, which is a well-known global brand for young parents like yourself, because they make baby buggies and all sorts of kids stuff. But I talked to Campbell about the need to manage our respective family wealth. And at the same time, I then ran into an old friend of mine within the industry, Chris DeLever, who is a portfolio manager, investment specialist, who, like you, I've known for lots of years and have huge respect for, having seen him working in shops like Mercer, the global investment business, as well as Harbour Asset Management in Wellington. And so really those conversations led to the three of us teaming up and launching our own funds management, or Aurellan Asset Management. Now, Aurellan started managing portfolios and funds for our clients in December last year. And today we have around $150 million of funds under management. So it's seen pretty fast growth, but a big chunk of that's come from our shareholders. But we've stoked to have won another about 10 clients this year, wholesale clients that is, plus already seen great flows through InvestNow. So, massive thanks to the InvestNow team and your support for our funds as well.
Yeah, it's amazing growth to hear in such a short amount of time, right? And one thing that really stood out to me about Aurellan was just how deliberate the design process was. So kind of between you and Chris, who've got decades in the investment industry, you guys have seen firsthand how different managers operate, what works well, where things don't always serve investors as well as they could, right? So when you and Chris were designing the investment philosophy behind Aurellan, can you kind of walk me through what the key principles you wanted baked into how you guys actually approached managing money?
Yeah, and first, yeah, and it is interesting because you're exactly right, Jason, as it comes from years of looking at the industry and watching different groups managing money. I think I've been in the industry since the early 1990s and around similar sorts of funds and structures throughout that time. And so really we stepped back and looked at the industry and said, how do we want to manage our own family's money? And for me, it's really about access to investment expertise. It's about bringing together a big team of really skilled people across the globe who've got deep, specific skills in being able to dig out great investment opportunities and ideas, while also focusing into some of those areas that are dear to my heart, like tax, minimising cost and fees. So it's about getting all of it right. But if we look at something like our global shares funds, there we want to have access to what we see as some of the best global share managers in the world. We do that through, the first step is really identifying those managers, and we've partnered up with Wilshire, who are a huge US investment research and consultancy house who've got teams of people who go around the world researching and identifying managers' skills and things. They manage on something like 1.5 or 1.7 trillion US dollars, with some of their clients being the largest, most sophisticated clients in the world. So we deliberately went and found Wilshire. We looked at similar businesses as theirs to have that global reach and research to ride alongside our local investment skills and tax skills. And so Wilshire then combed the world and came back and said, look, here's 3 specialist managers we think that you should use within your fund, and the configuration of them within that. And there's a lot of science to that. Wilshire is founded by an ex-NASA rocket scientist, and you can really see that in the way they analyse things and think about data. I guess, the analogy I'd use is our investment approach is a bit like, or could be found in looking at the Olympics. You can go and find a generalist sort of decathlete type manager who can do everything. Or our approach is to really zoom in on specialists, finding the best 100-metre runner, the best shot putter, the best high jumper, and bringing them together in their own area of expertise to drive value, and combining them within our funds, but also, looking at things like tax efficiency as well. If I look at a platform like InvestNow, I think you've got 27 different active funds on there in the global equity space. There are great funds there, undoubtedly, but a lot of those PI funds exist because the managers are either based here or close by, operating out of an area like Australia. Are they the absolute best 27 managers you could find in the world? I think that would be a real challenge, whereas our approach is, again, to work with Wilshire to go through the whole global universe and then to bring those managers together for our clients in an efficient, sort of tax-effective way. So, I guess it's interesting, it's all back to that access of global experts within the solutions that we're creating.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a common theme throughout your career, right, Anthony? It's all about just breaking down those barriers to access to world-class investments.
Absolutely. Access is sort of a fundamental thing that's been behind all of the businesses that I've set up. It's interesting.
Yeah. And you've touched on a lot there in terms of how Aurellan really manages money. And look, you're absolutely right. There's no shortage of global shares funds out there in the market, right? So I want to bring this back to InvestNow customers and really make it tangible from them. So if they're looking at your funds for the first time, from your perspective, what would you say is the biggest selling point or difference that really defines Aurellan and genuinely sets your funds apart?
Yeah, and so within the Aurellan Global Shares Fund, there's a hedge fund and an unhedged fund, so people can tailor their currency hedging. Both of them have got the same underlying portfolio set up. They both use within that we use 3 specialist managers that we've worked with Wilshire to identify and employ, being our value manager, Causeway, Capital, LA-based manager, one that is actually called Los Angeles Capital is our core manager. They have core quantitative approach. And we've also got Loomis Sales, who are running a growth portfolio for us alongside that. So we've put those managers together. And probably before we go into the sort of features of that, or what we see as the key benefits, just to explain a bit of how that works. I can't understate the importance of style when it comes to looking at global equity managers. A value manager like Sarah Ketterer's team at Causeway Capital tends to focus on undervalued companies that have still got strong fundamentals. In a practical sense, I think of a value manager being like accountants when it comes to analysing and thinking about shares. They like to check that they aren't paying too much for decent earnings and, decent companies. And so Sarah Ketterer's team at Causeway are a true global equity boutique as well. This is all they do. For us, they're running a portfolio of about 45 to 50 hand-picked value stocks. Now, in contrast, Loomis Sales as a growth manager have got a far more sort of, I guess, optimistic view of how they think about companies. They're trying to find those companies that are going to really benefit from growth factors into the future, changes in technology. These are the sort of people who can find a way to justify buying into really highly valued companies that have got great growth prospects. They naturally will buy very different companies, though, to Causeway Capital. So both approaches are incredibly valid, but at the same time will result in very different portfolios that they're picking for our clients. So again, we've worked with Wilshire to bring them together in a blended way so that we get an all-weather portfolio that will perform through different market cycles. And I think that's important because people will tend to chase performance. Right now, value managers are all the rage. I think within the MJW survey that's done here in NZ, you'll find the median value manager over the last 5 years has returned about 18%. Well, the median growth managers only returned about 12%. So a big difference in the performance that the styles have generated. Now, that's not to say that value is better than growth. It's just been an environment where these cheaper sort of, more fundamentally valued companies have gone better than the sort of high growth end. And for us, we want to have a manager in each area.
Yeah, and that's the nature of markets, right? There's always going to be one factor or one style that outperforms the other depending on the climate. But if you have a mix of them in the right blend, then you can genuinely have an all-weather portfolio.
100%. And it's again, diversification comes up everywhere in our industry, right? You want to diversify by style because you find that it's impossible to predict when one style is going to perform over the other. And so chasing managers is really hard. And I think a really tough thing for investors is the managers then disguise their style really well when they're performing well. They tend to use language straight away like we're an all-weather manager and we'll always outperform. And I think that, if anything, that's a real mistake because they sort of paint a picture that they're always going to add value, yet it's an impossible thing to do because of the way your style plays to that. And equally, I think it's easy for investors to sort of think, oh, well, our manager can change his spots. Well, you can't, I'm an optimist by trade, I'm a sales guy. I'd make a growth manager. Value managers are very different in the way they analyse and think about companies, and you tend to find birds of a feather absolutely flock together, right? They only want to employ people with value managers like them. That's how they manage money. And in a big investment world, that specialisation pays off, Causeway Capital manages $60 billion across 100 staff. This is a super successful, I still call it a boutique, but it would be bigger than any fund manager in NZ as a specialist thing. So they get rewarded for that expertise.
Yeah. Anthony, look, really appreciate you taking the time today. And it's great to have you and Aurellan back in front of the InvestNow community. So for anyone watching who wants to learn more, you can find the Aurellan Global Shares Fund and the Hedge Global Shares Fund on InvestNow, along with full fund information on the Aurellan landing page on our website. Thanks again, Anthony, for your time.
And massive thanks.
No worries, mate. We'll see you all next time.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you.